The fiery streak across the evening sky momentarily turned the forest of Arcturus IV into a tableau of crimson and amber. Brandon Reeves looked up from his workbench, squinting at the intense light as it tore through the planetary atmosphere. A heartbeat later, the ground beneath his cabin trembled with the unmistakable impact of something massive striking Earth. "Hell's teeth," Brandon muttered, reaching for his hunting rifle and emergency medical kit. After 2 years of self-imposed exile on this frontier world, instincts from his military days kicked in automatically. Whatever had crashed was close, perhaps less than a kilometer through the dense pine forest surrounding his homestead. As he trudged through the underbrush, the smell hit him first, a strange mixture of superheated metal and something organic, almost like amber syrup, but with a metallic undertone. The scent grew stronger as he approached a newly formed crater where pines had been snapped like twigs, revealing a downed vessel, unlike any human craft he had ever seen. The ship was oval-shaped, its hull shimmering with an iridescent metal that seemed to pulse with residual energy. Fracture lines spread across the surface like spider webs, and from several of these wounds leaked a viscous amber fluid, the source of the strange smell. Brandon approached cautiously, rifle raised, scanning for movement. The cockpit section had been partially crushed, its translucent canopy shattered. Brandon peered inside, and his breath caught in his throat. Lying amid twisted control systems was a creature that superficially resembled a large tiger cub. But that's where the similarity ended. Its coat was a striking pattern of orange and black, but the fur seemed to shimmer with a metallic quality in the dying light. The creature's head was more angular than any earth feline, with pointed, upright ears that ended in tufts that seemed to glow faintly. One of its hind legs was clearly broken, the limb bent at an unnatural angle, and several lacerations across its flank oozed the same amber fluid that dripped from the ship's hull. The creature's eyes fluttered open, amber orbs with vertical pupils that fixed on Brandon with startling intelligence. It made a soft, chirping sound, something between a whimper and a growl, exposing teeth that were clearly designed for tearing flesh. Brandon's first instinct was to call the colonial authorities. This was clearly a first contact situation, possibly involving a juvenile of an unknown sentient species. Protocols dictated immediate notification of the outpost and quarantine procedures. Instead, he found himself holstering his weapon and retrieving the medical kit. "Easy there," he whispered, approaching slowly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature tensed, but didn't attempt to flee or attack as Brandon assessed its injuries. The broken leg would need to be set, and the lacerations required cleaning and possibly sutures. But more immediately concerning was what to do about the crashed ship. If Brandon reported this, authorities would descend within hours. The creature would be taken for study, possibly never to see its home again, making a decision that would alter the course of his life. Brandon retrieved emergency demolition charges from his pack, remnants of his military kit that he'd never surrendered. With practiced efficiency, he placed them at key structural points on the craft. 40 minutes later, he was carrying the sedated creature away from the crash site, the night behind him erupting in a controlled explosion that would leave little for investigators to find, but scattered debris consistent with a meteor impact. "I must be out of my mind," he muttered to the unconscious alien in his arms, feeling the faint thrum of its heartbeat against his chest. "But I know what it's like to be poked and prodded against your will. Not happening to you, little one." Back at his cabin, Brandon transformed his workshop into a makeshift medical bay. He carefully splinted the broken leg, using techniques he'd learned when training combat animals for the military. The creature's wounds were cleaned and bandaged, though Brandon noted with fascination that the smaller cuts already seemed to be sealing themselves with a thin metallic film. Some kind of accelerated healing, unlike anything he'd seen in Earth species. As dawn broke over Arcturus IV, Brandon Reeves settled into a chair beside his unusual patient. his hand gently resting on the creature's flank, feeling its steady breathing. Just as his own eyes began to close with exhaustion, he experienced a momentary flash, like a waking dream, of soaring metallic hallways and a distant figure seated upon a throne. The image was gone as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Brandon to wonder if fatigue was causing him to hallucinate. The creature's eyes opened again, fixing on him with that same unsettling intelligence. "What are you?" Brandon whispered. "And what am I going to do with you?" The chirping sound came again, softer this time, almost like a purr. Brandon found himself smiling despite the gravity of his situation. "Well, I can't keep calling you creature, can I? How about Alora? It was my grandmother's name. She was fierce, too." The creature, Alora, blinked slowly, and Brandon could have sworn he felt a faint sensation of approval brush against his consciousness. The monthly video call chime jarred Brandon from the light doze he'd fallen into beside Alora's makeshift bed. He cursed under his breath. He'd forgotten about the mandatory psychological evaluation required by the colonial authority. Quickly checking that Alora was still sedated, he moved to his communication terminal, carefully angling the camera away from the workshop area. "Mr. Reeves," the colonial psychologist greeted with practiced warmth. "How are we doing this month?" "Fine," Brandon replied curtly. "Just the usual. Hunting, maintenance, solitude. Any unusual occurrences to report? Our satellite detected what appeared to be a small meteorite impact near your region last night." Brandon kept his expression neutral. "Saw the light show, heard the impact. Haven't bothered to check it out." The psychologist nodded, making notes. "Continuing to avoid investigative impulses is consistent with your isolation patterns. However, I should remind you that in 3 weeks, we'll be conducting your in-person evaluation. You'll need to come to the outpost for that." Brandon's stomach tightened. 3 weeks. He'd have to leave Alora alone or find some way to transport her. Impossible without detection. "Understood," he replied mechanically. After terminating the call, Brandon returned to the workshop to find Alora awake, attempting to stand despite the splint. "Whoa there," he said, rushing to steady her. "You're not ready for—" The thought remained unfinished as his hand touched Alora's flank. Images flooded his mind, more vivid than before, of vast metallic halls with organic-looking support columns. Strange beings with tiger-like features, but walking upright. And again, that distant figure on a throne, this time clearly feminine with amber eyes that matched Alora's. Brandon jerked his hand away, gasping. "What the hell was that?" he whispered. Alora made a soft, trilling sound, her eyes never leaving his face. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Brandon would tend to Alora's wounds, which healed with remarkable speed. The broken leg, which should have taken months to mend, showed signs of knitting together within days. The laceration sealed completely, leaving thin lines of what appeared to be metallic scar tissue. Each time Brandon touched Alora, the mental flashes became more frequent and detailed. He began to understand they weren't hallucinations, but some form of telepathic communication. Alora was showing him glimpses of her world, her people, a species called the Tigeron, from what Brandon could piece together. The first night, Brandon dreamed of running on 4 paws through gleaming corridors. He woke with a start, his heart racing with exhilaration rather than fear. The bond between them was strengthening, though Brandon couldn't explain how or why. Alora began accepting food, raw meat from Brandon's hunts, and showed increasing awareness of her surroundings. She would watch Brandon intently as he worked on various projects, her head tilted in apparent curiosity. The peaceful routine was shattered one afternoon when Brandon returned from checking his perimeter traps to find the workshop empty. Panic seized him as he searched the cabin, then expanded his hunt into the surrounding forest, calling Alora's name into the gathering dusk. He found her nearly a kilometer away, crouched over the carcass of what locals called a fangworm, a predatory invertebrate that could take down creatures 3 times its size. Alora had apparently hunted and killed it herself, despite her still healing leg. As Brandon approached, he was stunned by the speed with which Alora moved, a blur of orange and black that positioned her behind him before he could blink. The display should have terrified him, but instead, it reinforced his determination to protect her. Whatever Alora was, she was special, and the thought of her being captured and studied made his blood run cold. Rumors began to circulate among the scattered homesteaders of Arcturus IV. The supply pilot mentioned hearing about some large predator being spotted near Reeves' property. Questions were asked, eyebrows raised. During his second psychological evaluation call, Brandon was more careful to keep the video feed restricted to his face only. The psychologist seemed suspicious, but had no grounds to escalate concerns. Still, the looming in-person evaluation hung over Brandon like a storm cloud. One night, a particularly vivid telepathic flash hit Brandon as he was drifting to sleep. He saw what appeared to be a formal court proceeding, with elegantly dressed Tigran officials discussing something called the Living Palace and repeatedly referencing Empress Vishara. More disturbing was a glimpse of what seemed to be a military operation, with armored Tigran soldiers preparing a ship. The image was accompanied by a sense of urgent danger. Brandon woke with a start to find Alora standing beside his bed, but she was no longer the cub-like creature he'd rescued. Her form had changed dramatically, still tiger-like in features but now bipedal, standing on 2 legs with a more humanoid torso, though still covered in the metallic sheened orange and black fur. Her face had elongated slightly, becoming more expressive, and her front paws had developed into something more like hands, with opposable digits. "Danger comes," a voice echoed in his mind. Not quite speech, but a clear communication nonetheless. Brandon scrambled back, shock giving way to understanding. You can communicate? You're intelligent. I mean, I knew you were, but..." Carva searches. Elite hunter. My trainer. The telepathic communication was halting, but unmistakable. She follows. For Empress. "Empress Vishara?" Brandon asked, recalling the images. "You're connected to her somehow?" A flood of images answered him. Alora in a magnificent chamber, being trained by a stern-faced female Tigran, a sense of duty and protection surrounding the memories. Then fear, an explosion, the small scout ship spinning out of control. "You're not just a random alien creature," Brandon realized aloud. "You're something important to these people, to the Tigran." Alora's amber eyes blinked slowly in affirmation. "Guardian, to Empress, cub still, but bonded." Brandon ran a hand through his hair, trying to process this revelation. "And now someone's coming for you. Someone dangerous?" "Carva not danger. Carva loyal." Another image flashed, the stern trainer from before. "But others plot against Empress. Use me to hurt her." Brandon's military instincts kicked into high gear. "Then we need to move. Now. If they tracked your ship, they'll be here soon." He packed essential supplies while Alora watched, her new form allowing her to assist in small ways. The transformation was astounding, from injured cub to bipedal, communicative being in less than 2 weeks. Brandon wondered what other surprises Alora's species held. By dawn, they were speeding away from the homestead on Brandon's all-terrain vehicle, heading for the nearest settlement, Outpost Meridian, a collection of about a dozen families who maintained a tenuous existence on the frontier. Brandon knew the risk was substantial. Introducing Alora to other humans could backfire spectacularly, but staying isolated made them easy targets. Ellie Mercer, the de facto leader of Outpost Meridian, was less than pleased when Brandon arrived at the settlement's perimeter. Her weather-beaten face creased with suspicion as she leveled a pulse rifle at the ATV. Reeves, she called out. What the hell brings you here after 2 years of playing hermit? Brandon stepped off the vehicle, deliberately positioning himself between Ellie and Alora, who remained partially concealed under a tarp. I need shelter, Ellie. Just for a day or two. Since when do you need anything from anybody? Her eyes narrowed. What are you hiding back there? Brandon took a deep breath. I saved someone. Someone who's being hunted. I need your help. Someone. Ellie's voice dripped with skepticism. You haven't spoken to another human being by choice since you landed on this rock. It's complicated. Brandon gestured for Alora to stand. She's not from around here. Ellie's face transformed from suspicion to shock to outrage as Alora emerged, standing tall in her bipedal form, amber eyes scanning the settlement's defensive perimeter with tactical precision. Reeves, you brought a goddamn alien to my doorstep? Ellie hissed, raising her rifle again. Are you out of your mind? She's being hunted, Brandon said firmly. We just need shelter temporarily. She? Ellie's gaze darted between Brandon and Alora. It's a she now? What have you gotten yourself into? Before Brandon could respond, Alora stepped forward, her movement fluid despite her still healing leg. I mean no harm, her telepathic voice projected, causing Ellie to stagger back. Did you just speak in my head? Ellie demanded. She's Tigeron, Brandon explained quickly. They communicate telepathically. She's important, some kind of royal guardian. There are others coming for her, and they're not all friendly. Ellie's grip on her rifle tightened. Royal? Guardian? Reeves. If you've gotten mixed up in some interstellar political bullshit. I crashed, Alora interrupted, her mental voice stronger now. Brandon saved me. Fixed broken parts. She gestured to her leg. Now Carva comes. Hunter. Maybe others. Bad ones. Jesus Christ, Ellie muttered. She stared at Alora for a long moment, then at Brandon. Emergency storage shed, end of the north row. It's the best I can do for now. She lowered her voice. But if anything happens to my people because of this, Reeves, I'm holding you personally responsible. The news of Brandon's arrival with his strange companion spread quickly through Outpost Meridian. Children were kept indoors, and armed settlers maintained a vigilant watch from observation posts. Brandon hated the disruption he'd caused, but knew they had few options. The emergency storage shed was little more than a reinforced metal box, but it provided cover and a defensible position. Brandon spent the afternoon rigging primitive alarms around the perimeter while Alora rested, her transformation having clearly taxed her strength. Why did you change form? Brandon asked as dusk fell. Is that normal for your species? Alora's amber eyes glinted in the dim light. Cubs grow, need energy. She sent an image of smaller Tigeron, gradually developing into their adult forms. Danger made growth faster. Brandon nodded, thinking of how some Earth species could accelerate development in response to threats. And the telepathy. Has that always been there? Always, Alora confirmed. Stronger with bond. You and I, unusual bond. Because I'm human. Because you saved. Because you care. Alora's mental voice carried a warmth that made Brandon look away, uncomfortable with the emotion it stirred in him. The first attack came at dawn. Brandon was awakened by one of his alarms, a simple string of cans, clattering in the distance. He grabbed his rifle and peered through a narrow slit in the shed's wall. A figure clad in sleek armor that seemed to shift colors with the environment was advancing through the settlement, moving with predatory grace. Unlike Alora, this Tigeron was fully adult, with more pronounced features and a confident bearing that spoke of years of combat experience. Carva, Alora whispered in his mind. Elite hunter, my trainer. Brandon watched as Carva disabled two settlers who attempted to intercept her, her movements almost too fast to follow. She didn't kill them, simply rendered them unconscious with precise strikes. "Is she here to help or hurt you?" Brandon asked, tracking the hunter with his rifle scope. "Carva loyal to Empress," Alora replied, but uncertainty colored her mental voice. "But may believe I need retrieval. May not understand bond." The situation escalated when Carva seized Ellie Mercer, holding her at point-blank range with a weapon that hummed with energy. "Bring the guardian cub to me," Carva's voice boomed across the settlement, somehow translated into English. "By order of the Royal House of Tigeron, harboring the Empress's property is a capital offense." Brandon's jaw tightened. "Property? Is that how they see you?" Alora's mental presence wavered. "Cubs are protected, valued, not property, but not yet full person." "Well, that's not how we do things here," Brandon muttered, adjusting his aim. "I'm going to give us an opening. When I fire, move to the south perimeter. There's a drainage culvert that leads to the forest." "No," Alora's response was firm. "Carva must see truth. About Xerox." "Xerox? Who's Xerox?" Instead of answering, Alora moved to the shed door. "I show myself, you cover." Before Brandon could protest, Alora had slipped outside. He cursed and repositioned, keeping his scope trained on Carva, who still held Ellie as a human shield. Carva's posture changed instantly when she spotted Alora. "Guardian Alora!" she called out, her translator converting her words. "You have changed form prematurely. The bonding process has been compromised. You must return for purification." "No purification needed," Alora projected, her mental voice now strong enough that Brandon suspected everyone in the vicinity could hear it. "Bond is true. Brandon saved. Protected." "A human cannot bond with a guardian," Carva replied, her tone dismissive. "It is forbidden by Imperial law. The High Commander has ordered your immediate return." Brandon saw his opening as Carva's attention fixed on Alora. He fired a precise shot that struck the hunter's armor just below the shoulder joint, not to kill, but to disrupt her grip on Ellie. The effect was instantaneous. Carva staggered, releasing Ellie, who scrambled away. Brandon fired again, forcing Carva to take cover behind a water collection tank. Alora moved with surprising speed, positioning herself between the settlers and Carva. "Xerox betrays," she projected with such force that Brandon felt the mental shout like a physical blow. "Show you truth!" What happened next defied explanation. Alora and Carva locked gazes across the distance, and both Tigeron went rigid, as if caught in some invisible current. Brandon kept his rifle trained on Carva, but didn't fire, sensing that something crucial was transpiring. After what seemed like an eternity, but was likely only seconds, Carva dropped to one knee, her armored head bowed. "Impossible," she whispered, the translator catching her words. "The High Commander would not." "Saw plans," Alora projected, now moving cautiously toward her former trainer. "Coup against Empress. Use me as weapon. Xerox ordered my capture. Not for safety. For control." Brandon lowered his rifle slightly, approaching the two Tigeron. "Would someone mind filling me in?" Carva's head snapped up, her feline features twisting in what Brandon interpreted as surprise. "The human speaks as an equal," she observed. "Brandon is equal," Alora confirmed. "More. He is bonded guardian now." Carva rose slowly, her armor adjusting to her movement. "If what you have shown me is true, then the Empress is in grave danger. High Commander Xerox has positioned loyalists throughout the palace. The coup could happen at any moment. Then we need to warn her," Brandon said decisively. Carva studied him with unnerving intensity. "You would involve yourself in Tigeron affairs, knowing nothing of our politics or the consequences?" Brandon glanced at Alora, then back to Carva. "I'm already involved, and I know enough to recognize a power grab when I see one. For a moment, Carva was silent. Then, to Brandon's surprise, she inclined her head in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. Perhaps there is something to this bond after all. Very well, human. We will need your help to reach the Empress before Xerox realizes I have discovered his treachery. The settlement erupted into controlled chaos as news of the alliance spread. Ellie Mercer, rubbing her bruised throat where Carva had held her, was less than pleased. So now we're harboring not one, but two alien tigers with a political vendetta? She demanded. And you're telling me there might be more coming? We won't stay long, Brandon assured her. Carva has a shuttle at the outpost landing pad. We'll use that to reach the Tigeron flagship where the Empress is currently stationed. Ellie shook her head in disbelief. 2 years of perfect isolation, and now you're running off to save an alien Empress. You've lost your mind. Reeves. Probably, Brandon admitted. But for the first time since the accident, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Ellie's expression softened slightly. The implant failure. That wasn't your fault, you know. The investigation cleared you. Brandon looked away. 3 handlers died because my training protocols failed. Doesn't matter what the investigation said. I know what happened. And now you're training another predator, Ellie observed, glancing toward where Alora and Carva were engaged in what appeared to be an intense telepathic exchange. Must be like getting back on a horse that threw you. It's different, Brandon said quietly. Alora isn't just an animal to be controlled. She's more... Ellie studied him for a moment. You care about her, not just as a responsibility. Brandon didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. The Tigeron shuttle was unlike any human craft Brandon had encountered. Its interior seemed to blend technology with biology, with control surfaces that responded to thought as much as touch. Carva took the pilot's position, with Alora seated beside her. Brandon strapped himself into what he assumed was a passenger compartment, though the contours were clearly designed for Tigeron physiology. As they prepared for departure, Brandon was startled to see Alora's form changing again. The transition was more subtle this time, her features becoming more refined, more humanoid, though still unmistakably Tigeron. By the time the shuttle lifted off, Alora appeared to be a young adult Tigeron, her orange and black patterned fur sleeker, her amber eyes more penetrating. Your growth acceleration is remarkable, Carva observed, manipulating controls that seemed to respond to her intentions rather than physical input. The human's presence has catalyzed your development. Bond strengthens, Alora replied. And Brandon noticed she was now speaking aloud, her voice melodic, but with a raspy undertone. Brandon's care, his protection, it feeds the guardian essence. Carva glanced at Brandon, her expression unreadable. Human emotions are powerful catalysts, it seems, but untested in guardian bonds. The Empress will have concerns. The Empress will see truth, Alora said firmly. As you did. Brandon felt a wave of unease. He had acted on instinct when saving Alora, never considering the political implications. Now, he was headed into the heart of an alien power struggle, bonded to a creature whose full capabilities he barely understood. What exactly does this bond mean? He asked, as the shuttle broke atmosphere, the curve of Arcturus IV visible through the viewports. In practical terms, Carva and Alora exchanged glances. Guardian bond is sacred, Carva explained reluctantly. It links minds, emotions, sometimes physical sensations. In battle, bonded pairs move as one. In peace, they share thoughts freely. Traditionally, guardians bond with royal Tigeron, Alora added. My bond with you is unprecedented. Brandon absorbed this information, thinking of the mental flashes he'd experienced, the growing sense of Alora's presence in his mind. It should have frightened him, this alien connection. Instead, he found it oddly comforting. like finding a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing. The telepathic connection deepened during the journey to the Tigeron flagship. Brandon experienced more vivid glimpses of Alora's memories, her training as a guardian cub, her first meeting with Empress Vishara, the accident that had sent her scout ship spiraling toward Arcturus IV. In turn, he felt Alora exploring his past, his military career, the devastating implant failure that had led to 3 deaths, his self-imposed exile. There was no judgment in her mental touch, only understanding and, increasingly, a warmth that transcended species. Carva observed their interactions with a mixture of curiosity and concern. The bond is unusually strong for one so newly formed, she noted, as they approached the massive Tigeron vessel. High Commander Xerox will see it as a threat to our way of life. All the more reason to reach the Empress quickly, Brandon replied, studying the approaching flagship with tactical interest. The ship was a marvel of engineering, organic curves blended with metallic precision, its hull shimmering with the same iridescent quality as Alora's scout craft, but on a vastly larger scale. We cannot simply dock and request an audience, Carva warned. Xerox will have loyalists monitoring all arrivals. We must use the secondary docking bay, reserved for Guardian transports. Will they not question your return with Alora? Brandon asked. I am Elite Hunter, Carva said with a hint of pride. My authority to retrieve Guardians is absolute. The unusual element is you, human. Brandon comes as my bonded, Alora said firmly. By ancient law, none may separate a Guardian from their bond partner. Carva's expression suggested this interpretation of law might be contested, but she didn't argue. Instead, she focused on guiding the shuttle into a small docking port near the flagship's stern, away from the main hangar. The reception hall of the Tigeron flagship was a testament to alien aesthetics. The ceiling soared in a vaulted dome, inlaid with metals that seemed to shift and shimmer in response to light and movement. Support columns resembled organic growths rather than architectural elements, pulsing faintly with bioluminescent veins. The air itself felt different, charged with scents and sensations that human senses could barely process. Brandon felt distinctly out of place in his frontier clothing and light armor, the plasma knife at his hip seeming primitive compared to the elegant weaponry carried by Tigeron guards. Everywhere he turned, amber eyes regarded him with mixtures of curiosity, disdain, and outright hostility. Alora walked beside him, her posture regal despite her youth, while Carva led the way through corridors that seemed designed to disorient visitors. Brandon maintained his military bearing, refusing to show intimidation, though he was acutely aware of the precariousness of their position. The Empress holds court in the Living Palace, Carva explained, as they approached a massive doorway guarded by Tigeron warriors in ceremonial armor. Prepare yourself, human. Few of your kind have ever been granted access. The guards tensed as they approached, their weapons humming to readiness. Carva spoke rapidly in the Tigeron language, her authoritative tone brooking no argument. After a tense moment, the guards stepped aside, though their eyes never left Brandon. The throne room beyond defied description. The floor was a reflective surface that seemed to ripple like liquid while supporting weight perfectly. The walls curved organically, studded with what appeared to be living gemstones that pulsed with inner light. And at the far end, seated upon a throne that seemed to grow from the floor itself, was Empress Vishara. She was larger than other Tigeron Brandon had seen, her fur a deeper shade of orange with black stripes that formed complex patterns, unlike Alora's simpler markings. Her eyes were the same amber as Alora's, but held depths of age and wisdom that commanded immediate respect. She wore no crown, but elaborate jewelry adorned her neck and arms, each piece seeming to glow with inner power. Elite Hunter Carva. The Empress's voice resonated through the chamber, somehow perfectly understandable to Brandon, despite being in the Tiggeron language. You return with Guardian Alora, as ordered, but you bring a human into our sanctuary. Explain this breach of protocol. Carva dropped to one knee, head bowed. Empress, I bring grave news. Guardian Alora has formed a bond with this human, Brandon Reeves. But more urgently, I have evidence of treachery within your court. The Empress's eyes narrowed, her gaze shifting to Alora. Approach, young Guardian. Let me see what has transpired during your absence. Alora moved forward with graceful confidence, kneeling before the throne. Empress, I was lost. This human saved me, healed me, protected me. Our minds touched, and a bond formed. Unexpected, but true. A human cannot bond with a guardian. A new voice interrupted. A male Tiggeron stepped from behind the throne. His armor more elaborate than Carva's, his bearing commanding. It is a perversion of our sacred traditions. High Commander Xerox, Carva acknowledged, her posture stiffening. The bond exists. I have witnessed it myself. Xerox's gaze fell on Brandon, contempt evident in his expression. This human has contaminated a royal guardian. The cub must be purified, the human disposed of. The Empress held up a hand for silence. Alora, you claim this bond is true? You would defy millennia of tradition for this alien? I would defy anything for truth, Empress. Alora replied, her voice steady. And the truth is that High Commander Xerox orchestrated my accident. He intends to use me as a weapon against you. Xerox's fur bristled. Absurd! The cub has been corrupted by human influence. Her mind is no longer her own. Then let the Empress see for herself, Alora challenged, rising to her feet. Let her look into my memories, as is her right. Brandon tensed, sensing the dangerous game unfolding. He had positioned himself strategically, keeping both Xerox and the throne in his field of vision. Something about the High Commander's posture set off warning bells in his military-trained mind. Empress Vashara rose from her throne, her full height impressive, even by Tiggeron standards. I will examine the Guardian's memories, she declared, stepping toward Alora. It happened in an instant. Xerox's hand moved to his ceremonial belt, drawing a plasma dagger that hummed with deadly energy. For the purity of Tiggeron, he shouted, lunging toward the Empress. Brandon reacted on pure instinct, throwing himself forward to intercept Xerox. He caught the Tiggeron's arm, the plasma blade singing past his ear close enough to singe hair. Alora moved simultaneously, her guardian training evident as she positioned herself between the Empress and the attacker. The throne room erupted into chaos. Guards surged forward, unsure who to target in the melee. Brandon grappled with Xerox, the Tiggeron's superior strength nearly overwhelming him, but his human combat training giving him just enough advantage to maintain his grip on the armed wrist. Now, Alora, he shouted, knowing instinctively what needed to happen. Alora seized the moment, her amber eyes locking with the Empress's. A visible wave of energy seemed to pass between them, a telepathic transfer of such intensity that even non-telepathic beings in the room could sense it. Alora was sharing everything, her crash, Brandon's rescue, the bond that had formed, and most critically, the glimpses she had seen of Xerox's conspiracy. Empress Vashara staggered slightly under the mental onslaught, but her regal bearing quickly reasserted itself. Her eyes narrowed, then blazed with fury as she processed what Alora had shown her. Guards, she commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. Restrain High Commander Xerox. He is guilty of treason against the throne. Xerox roared in defiance, throwing Brandon aside with a surge of desperate strength. The human has corrupted them all, he bellowed. Can you not see? Our purity is at stake. But the guards had received their orders. Elite Tiggeron warriors surrounded Xerox, energy weapons trained on him from all sides. His conspiracy had depended on striking before Allura could return, before the Empress could learn the truth. Now, exposed, his options had vanished. Brandon picked himself up from the floor, wincing at what felt like cracked ribs. Allura was instantly at his side, supporting him with a strength that belied her slender frame. "You are injured," she said, concern flooding their bond. "I've had worse," he assured her, though the pain was considerable. Empress Vishara approached them, her imperial guards forming a protective circle around her. She studied Brandon with those penetrating amber eyes, seeing far more than just his physical form. "Human," she addressed him formally. "You have saved my guardian not once, but twice. First from death after the crash, and now from manipulation by a traitor. The throne of Tigeron acknowledges this debt." Brandon inclined his head respectfully. "I did what anyone would do." "No," the Empress contradicted him. "Most humans would have reported the crash, surrendered Allura to authorities. You chose a different path, at great personal risk." She turned to address the assembled court. "Today, we have witnessed something unprecedented, a true guardian bond between Tigeron and human. Our laws and traditions must adapt to this reality." Xerox, now restrained by multiple guards, snarled in protest. "This is blasphemy. The human will destroy everything we stand for." "Silence the traitor," the Empress commanded, and Xerox was swiftly removed from the throne room. She returned her attention to Brandon and Allura. "The bond between you is unusual, but undeniable. As Empress, I hereby recognize Brandon Reeves as an honorary guardian of the Tigeron royal house." Murmurs rippled through the court, some of approval, others of shock or dissent. Brandon felt Allura's joy surge through their bond, nearly overwhelming his own surprise. "Furthermore," the Empress continued, "I declare an immediate review of our isolation policies regarding humans. If one human can form such a bond with a guardian, perhaps our species are more compatible than we have allowed ourselves to believe." Carva stepped forward, kneeling before the Empress. "Your Majesty, there are still Xerox loyalists throughout the fleet. The conspiracy may run deeper than we yet know." "Indeed," the Empress acknowledged, "which is why I must ask for your continued service. Elite Hunter, root out the remaining traitors. Restore security to the royal house." "It will be done," Carva pledged. The Empress turned back to Brandon and Allura. "You are both free to return to Arcturus IV. The human settlement there will be granted special protectorate status under Tigeron law. Allura will serve as my eyes and ears in this new frontier of cooperation between our species." Brandon bowed, recognizing the significance of the gesture. "Thank you, Your Majesty. We won't let you down." As they prepared to depart the flagship, Carva approached Brandon privately. "You fought well, human. Not many of your kind could have held their own against a Tigeron commander, even briefly." "Military training," Brandon explained, "and a healthy dose of desperation." Carva's expression shifted to what might have been the Tigeron equivalent of a smile. "The bond between you and Allura, it is strong. Stronger than any I have witnessed between trainees. Guard it well. Such connections are rare and precious, even among our kind." "I will," Brandon promised, glancing toward where Allura was conferring with royal attendants. Through their bond, he could sense her excitement and pride, but also her impatience to return to Arcturus IV, to what she now considered home. The return to Outpost Meridian was met with a mixture of relief and wary curiosity. Word of the confrontation aboard the Tigeron flagship had somehow preceded them, likely through official channels as the Empress began implementing her new policies. Ellie Mercer greeted them at the landing pad, her expression caught between disbelief and reluctant respect. "So," she said, eyeing the elegant Tigeron shuttle, "you actually did it, saved an alien Empress, foiled a coup, and got our little outpost designated as some kind of interspecies diplomatic zone. Not bad for a guy who spent 2 years talking to nobody. Brandon smiled tiredly. Just needed the right motivation, I guess. Alora stepped from the shuttle, now fully transformed into a young adult Tigeron, her bearing regal, but her expression warm as she surveyed the human settlement. Several children peeked from behind buildings, their fear now mingled with fascination. Your people need not fear, Alora projected, her telepathic voice gentle enough that even the children could receive it without distress. I am guardian to this place now, as well as to Empress Vishara. That's going to take some getting used to, Ellie muttered, tapping her temple. The whole mind-talking thing. You adapt quickly, Brandon observed. 2 days ago, you were pointing a rifle at her. Ellie shrugged. 2 days ago, I didn't have confirmation that she was royal security for a spacefaring empire. Amazing how that changes perspectives. 6 months passed with remarkable swiftness. The small human settlement of Outpost Meridian transformed under its new status as a human Tigeron protectorate. Tigeron engineers arrived to assist with infrastructure improvements, installing automated defense systems and upgrading living quarters. Human colonists and Tigeran visitors worked side by side. Initial tensions gradually giving way to cautious cooperation and even friendship. Brandon found himself in the unexpected role of instructor, teaching a class of mixed human and Tigeron trainees about interspecies communication and basic telepathic techniques. Beside him, Alora demonstrated the finer points of the guardian bond, her presence a constant comfort in his mind. The key is not to force the connection, Brandon explained to a particularly frustrated human student who was attempting to establish rudimentary telepathic contact with a young Tigeron. It's more like opening a door and inviting someone in. Easy for you to say, the student grumbled. You've got some kind of super bond with a royal guardian. Brandon smiled. Every bond starts somewhere. Ours began with a crashed ship and a broken leg. Alora, overhearing, sent a warm pulse of amusement through their connection. Her role as official guardian to the Protectorate kept her busy, but she always made time for these training sessions, recognizing their importance to the Empress's vision of cooperation. Their personal relationship had evolved in ways neither could have anticipated. What had begun as a rescue, then developed into a protective bond, had blossomed into something deeper, a connection that transcended species barriers. Though physically different in fundamental ways, their minds and emotions had found common ground, creating a partnership that many on both sides now viewed as a model for human Tigeron relations. Not everyone approved. Of course, conservative elements among both species viewed the bond with suspicion or outright hostility. There had been incidents, attempted sabotage of protectorate projects, propaganda against species contamination. But such resistance only strengthened the determination of those working toward cooperation. The Protectorate headquarters, now a substantial structure combining human practical design with Tigeron aesthetic elements, served as both administrative center and symbolic heart of the experiment. From its observation deck, Brandon and Alora often watched Arcturus IV's 3 moons rise over the pine forests, their light casting everything in silver-blue radiance. Do you ever regret it? Brandon asked one evening as they stood side by side. Bonding with a human instead of a royal Tigeron, as tradition dictated? Alora's amber eyes reflected the moonlight as she turned to him. Tradition is valuable guide, not prison, she replied. Her spoken English now nearly perfect, though still carrying that distinctive raspy undertone. Bond chooses itself. Ours chose well. Brandon smiled, the warmth of her certainty flowing through their connection. Even with all the complications, the politics, the cultural clashes, especially with complications, Alora said firmly, bond that survives difficulty proves strength. Ours has survived much. She was right, of course. From their first tentative mental contact in his workshop to the confrontation with Xerox. Through months of building a new kind of community, their bond had been tested repeatedly and emerged stronger each time. A chime sounded from below, indicating the arrival of an official transport. "That will be the Empress," Brandon noted, checking the time. "Right on schedule for the commemoration ceremony." Empress Vashara's visits to the Protectorate had become quarterly events, each one drawing more attention from both human colonial authorities and Tigaran nobility. Today's ceremony would mark the official opening of the first Joint Training Academy, where humans and Tigaran would study together in preparation for roles throughout Tigaran space. As they descended to the reception area, Brandon felt a surge of pride, not just in what they had accomplished, but in how far he had come personally. The guilt that had driven him to isolation had not vanished entirely, but it had transformed, becoming a foundation for something constructive rather than a prison of self-punishment. The ceremony itself was brief, but meaningful. Empress Vashara, resplendent in formal regalia, presented Brandon with the Guardian Seal, a purple gemstone inscribed with his name in Tigaran script, symbolizing his permanent acceptance among their kind. To Alora, she bestowed the rarely granted title of Ambassador Guardian, formalizing her role as bridge between species. "Today marks not merely an anniversary," the Empress declared to the assembled humans and Tigaran, "but the beginning of a new chapter in our shared history. What began as a rescue, one being helping another in need, has blossomed into an alliance that promises benefits for both our peoples." Brandon, standing beside Alora on the ceremonial platform, surveyed the faces before him. Human settlers who had once viewed Alora with fear, now listening respectfully to an alien empress. Tigaran nobles who had dismissed humans as primitive, now engaging in earnest conversation with colonial officials. "There will be challenges ahead," the Empress continued, as if sensing his thoughts. "Those who resist change, who cling to old hatreds and fears, remnants of Xerox's conspiracy, still lurk within our systems, and human authorities beyond this frontier remain wary of deeper engagement with Tigaran." Her amber gaze swept the crowd. "But standing before you is proof that such obstacles can be overcome. Guardian Alora and Honorary Guardian Brandon have shown us that connection transcends difference, that bonds can form where none were thought possible." Later, as the formal ceremonies gave way to more relaxed celebration, Brandon and Alora stood on the balcony of the Protectorate headquarters, watching the first class of mixed human Tigaran students gathering below. Young humans with wide eyes, full of wonder. Young Tigaran with proud postures masking their own excitement. All of them pioneers in their way. "We've come a long way from that crashed scout ship," Brandon observed. Alora's hand, still strange in its combination of human dexterity and feline grace, found his. "Far journey still ahead," she replied, "but not alone now." Below them, a human child cautiously approached a young Tigaran, hand extended in greeting. After a moment's hesitation, the Tigaran responded not with a handshake, but with a gentle touch to the child's temple, a gesture of telepathic acknowledgement. The human child's expression of surprise gave way to delight. "No," Brandon agreed, the scene filling him with quiet hope. "Definitely not alone." As Arcturus IV's 3 moons climbed higher in the night sky, their light shimmered across the settlement, across human buildings and Tigaran additions, across faces both familiar and alien, across a community that had once seemed impossible. The light caught the Guardian Seal at Brandon's throat, sending purple reflections dancing across the balcony. Not perfect, not without challenges, but a beginning, a bond between worlds, started with one man's choice to save rather than fear the unknown. And in that bond, the promise of something greater than either species could achieve alone.